Hey, and welcome to Untimely Reviews, a new series where I talk about things that are extremely irrelevant at the time, but interesting enough to talk about. Since this is the first in the series, at least on this channel, since I actually started on my website at the initiative.home.blog, link in the description, I think it's important to explain the structure of each episode. First, I'm going to start with a brief history of the project. This will be things like the name of the director and other works that they've done along with the screenwriter, and any other introductory facts that I think are kinda cool. The second part is where I talk about the plot or story of the project. Think of this section as a synopsis on IMDb you skip when you're trying to figure out the name of that actor that you know was in this other movie and wait, no, it actually wasn't that guy at all. Usually before this section I'll let you guys know that we're entering into spoiler territory, but since most of these reviews will be about extremely old things, it really shouldn't even matter. The third part is where I give my thoughts on the project. This can be looked at as the meat of the review. I'll be talking about character motivations, theories, individual scenes, and other things that I just thought were interesting. Finally, I'll round out everything with the conclusion about everything I enjoyed and everything that I non-enjoyed. This really is just a college essay with jokes and memes in it. With all that out of the way, let's get into Metropolis. Alright, so disclaimer, I don't speak German, and instead of typing the names into Google Translate like an attentive YouTuber, I'm just gonna say everyone's name how I think they should sound. We good? Good. Metropolis is a 1927 science fiction silent film directed by Fritz Lang, and the screenplay was written by Thea von Harbou with input from Lang. Lang and Harbou also went on to direct and write M, which is also considered to be influential for the film noir genre. One of the most interesting aspects of Metropolis is how it was cut for time after its initial release. When it was first released, it was 2 hours and 33 minutes, but went through several alterations either through some of the film being lost or cut to help the film's pacing. The version I watched, which I'll include a link to in the description, was 2 hours and 28 minutes, and I can definitely see why the film was originally criticized for its length. Pause! Now on to the plot. The film opens with what looks like hundreds of workers shambling toward an elevator which takes them to the workers' city. The film then shifts to show Frieder, the son of the city's master, Joe Friederson, which means his name is Frieder Friederson. So already I'm looking at this dude crazy. But after some funny, I guess, interactions with an unnamed lady, Frieder first meets Maria, who he immediately falls in love with. So he chases after her into the factory where the workers from earlier are. While there, Frieder sees one of the machines overheat and sees visions of Egyptian slaves and just watches as people burn and fall like 30 feet in front of him in terror. Again, instead of tending to the workers, Frieder runs to his father to tell him about it and how awful it was. This is where we see how his father thinks of the workers, saying that they belong in the depths, which surprises Frieder. Then, after Grot, the guardian of the heart machine, brings plans that were in the pockets of two of the workers who I assume died to Joe, Joe fires Josephet, who seemed to be his assistant. Knowing that this means that Josephet will have to work in the machine factory, Frieder runs after him like the fucking Flash and stops him from shooting himself, which I didn't even notice the first time I watched this. Why he brought a gun to work, I still don't know. But Frieder tells Josephet to wait for him at home and goes back to the factory to switch places, Prince and the Pauper style, with Georgie, or who is later referred to as Worker at 11811. While this was happening, Joe tells the Thin Man, very original name, to tail Frieder, but starts following Georgie because they switch clothes. After this, we are introduced to Rotwang. This is so childish. And we learn that Frieder's mother, Hel, passed away during childbirth, and that Rotwang is madly in love with her, and has created a robot that he hopes will take Hel's place. We learn that Joe went to Rotwang to ask what the plans mean, and he shows Joe that the workers have been listening to Maria, who has been inspiring them with the idea that there will be a person who will link the workers with Joe. And of course, it's gotta be Frieder. Joe then tells Rotwang to use Maria's likeness on his Hel robot so that they can discredit her and take away any hope for the workers, just because he's a dick, I guess. But we see that Rotwang plans to double-cross Joe. After chasing Maria and kidnapping her, we reach the end of the prelude. We then pick up with Frieder in a cathedral, and he says to the representation of death and the 7 deadly sins to stay away from him and Maria. After that, we see that the Thin Man has caught Georgie and finds out where Josephet has been, and he goes there to try and find Frieder. Through sheer coincidence, Frieder hears Maria's screams from Rotwang's lab and tries to find her, but is too late and can't stop the process. Once the process is over, Frieder lashes out at Rotwang and asks where Maria is, and Rotwang tells him that she will be with his father. So, using his speed, he races back to Joe's office and sees his father with Maria, which causes Frieder to pass out. Then, Joe and Rotwang have the new Robo Maria to dance provocatively in front of the wealthier men in the Metropolis, and they go crazy over her, to the point of fighting each other. After this, Frieder wakes up and goes to Josephet's house where he tells Frieder about the new Robo Maria. We then see that Maria is still alive, and Rotwang speaks to her. Then, we see the Robo Maria instill more aggressive and violent ideals in the workers, which causes them to riot and destroy the factory. In this riot, the workers' city is flooded, and Robo Maria is blamed for it. But because the OG Maria is around helping the children that the workers just forgot about, I guess, she gets chased by them. The Robo Maria and the OG Maria then switch places as the two crowds that they are in mix, and OG Maria is able to escape, but is then chased by Rotwang as he thinks that she is the Robo Maria, and the Robo Maria is burned at the stake. This is even more confusing when there's no words being said. Trust me. The Robo Maria is then revealed to be a robot, and Frieder sees the OG Maria being chased by Rotwang. Rotwang and Frieder end up fighting, Rotwang is thrown off a roof, and the movie ends with Frieder bridging the gap between the workers and his father. So yay, happy ending, except the workers' homes are still destroyed and underwater. Yay! So now a little tour through some of the things that I thought were interesting or weird about Metropolis. First, look at bro pants. No one in this entire movie wears these Peter Pan ass pants. Okay, so I just looked up Peter Pan and he doesn't even wear pants like this, but Peter Pan ass pants is too funny to take out, so just let me run with it. And every time I see Frieder with these things on, I just could not take him seriously at all. Something else that I thought was weird was that all the clocks only went up to 10, and I was very confused about why this was a thing. I saw a theory about how this was supposed to show a 10-hour workday and that the workers don't need a clock with 12 hours because they are only focused on work, but this doesn't really make sense to me because they could still work 10 hours or even the full 12 hours to then be off for the same amount. Maybe I'm just missing something. I'm still thinking about this one, honestly. Also, since this is a science fiction movie, aside from the dystopia and Robo Maria, they also showed off FaceTime super casually, which shows that the writers had some semblance of creativity and foresight, but the plot shows that they were a little too naive about how an extreme capitalist regime would actually work. As critics of the time mentioned, the plot seems to be written by people who think that issues of classism can be changed just by singing Kumbaya together. So my reading of the text is that by the movie's own admission, it believes that there are three types of people: hands, brains, and hearts. And because of how the hierarchy is shown, the movie is saying that hands have to be connected with the brain to not be treated like slaves. But it doesn't give a reason why the brain would actually need to be connected with the hands. Joe doesn't suffer at all during the movie. He doesn't lose anything, and he honestly doesn't even seem to learn anything either. He just decides to connect with the hands because the movie was already 2.5 hours long and the shit needed to end. Like, look how this movie ends. The only ones to lose anything were the workers, or hands, and Rotwang, who lost both his creation and his life, and for what? Nobody learns from it, and because the movie ends so abruptly, no one even acknowledges that they just saw a dude fall like 4 stories. Sure, he made several bad decisions, and I'm not saying he's a good guy or deserved to have a happy ending, but what exactly made him worse than Joe in this movie? This movie also does something that I don't like with protagonists. It makes the world so terrible and filled with awful people that people who are doing the bare minimum seem like heroes. For example, Frieder only goes to the factory because he was infatuated with Maria. He wasn't even interested in the workers until he saw how awful their working conditions were. And another thing, when he talks to Death in the 7 Deadly Sins, he doesn't even ask them to stay away from him and his brothers and sisters. He only mentions himself and Maria, which further solidifies that he didn't care about them the way Maria and Joe think that he does. And even with the message of factory workers being treated as slaves being integral to the story, this still feels like a stuffy old white person movie. No, wait. Also in the movie, things are always just constantly happening for no reason, and maybe that's the point of expressionism, but that shit sucks when you're trying to figure out why Maria brought mad children to the garden in the first place, or why Maria is the leader of the workers. The only really interesting aspect of the story to me was how Joe and Rotwang used Maria, the saintly figure to the workers, and bastardized her image to shift the workers' ideals and cause them to destroy themselves. But again, this makes the workers look stupid, especially since they blame the Robo Maria and are avoiding accountability, failing to realize how their actions have a negative effect on not only themselves, but also those around them. Shout out Joe Button for that bar.
But we're not friends.
The only other thing that really stood out for me was how overly dramatic everything was. I mean, just look at this. All this does tie into the whole silent movie genre though. I think because there is such a distinct lack of dialogue in this movie, it causes the viewer to think more about what's going on, and I think the viewer is overall more attentive to the movie because of it. At least I was while watching it. But now here's my final thoughts. I'll be honest, this movie was a slog to get through. The plot was meandering, and honestly this movie had no business being longer than 2 hours. And even though I thought some of the special effects were dope, especially since this movie is almost 100 years old, from a plot perspective, there just isn't enough here for me to really like it. But it was interesting to see this classic of the science fiction genre and how it laid the groundwork for the future. So, what did you think? Did my review make you want to go check out Metropolis or stay away from it? What are some things that you think I should review next? Leave them in the comment section below and I'll see you in the next video.